Good morning, Chisinau. I hope I pronounced that right. I basically tried to find every version of how to pronounce this city online when I was flying in yesterday, so I hope I did it well. I'm very pleased to see all of you this morning, but of course you're not here to see me, but you're here for my presentation. So we're going to take a look into AI. And of course, the last 2 years, AI has seen a huge influx in the software development community for GitHub Copilot being introduced, ChatGPT coming to life. But how can you actually use these technologies in your daily work as a software developer? That is a challenge that many of us have and that we're going to try to tackle today. But first, to see how powerful tools like ChatGPT actually are, I tried a real-life example. So I submitted this CFP to the... Oh, so I see that the presentation is not working. So that would be great if that can be... Let's see... You know, this always happens, right? We did a tech check like an hour and a half ago, and then you'll see that either the cable is not connected correctly or something. So I'm looking a bit at the back. I see a lot of people like moving around. So I assume it's going to be fixed quickly. Yay, we're here. Woo! Great. Thanks, thank you so much. Yeah, so as I said, I am David de Hoop. I'm a solution architect and special agent at Team Rockstars IT. We are a Dutch cloud-native consulting company, and we're going to talk about AI. As I said, I tried to do a real-life example, and I submitted this CFP to this year's Moldova Developer Conference. Who here thinks that I wrote this CFP myself? Who thinks I let ChatGPT write this CFP? So about half of you. Yeah, that's completely true. I asked ChatGPT to write a CFP on how to explain to all of you what are the benefits of AI when doing greenfield software projects. And this is what came out of it, and apparently it was good, because otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? So I basically didn't have to do any changes myself to this piece of text. And that shows like how well large language models like ChatGPT are nowadays in creating engaging text that we like to read, and we think, oh, well, I think that's good. I think I'd like to join a session like that. But I think it's also always good to remember where we came from. So for that, we have to go back to the 12th of August, 1956, which basically means the milestone, namely the birth of modern AI. So basically, in this year, the summer of 1956, a group of scientists from different universities in the US, they did a summer research project in Dartmouth. So it was called the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on artificial intelligence. And they mainly tried to focus on two things: natural language processing, or NLP, which in computer science has been around for quite a long time, and neural networks. And they try to combine these two technologies in something that was the foundation for what we now call the GPT models. But it wasn't until March 12, 2015, when there was actually a breakthrough in NLP. with this paper that was being released by Stanford University called Deep Unsupervised Learning Using Non-Equilibrium Thermodynamics. So I am not a scientist nor a physicist, so I could not tell you what this paper is about, but I need to tell you that this, together with this paper on the 12th of June, you see a pattern here, like it's the 12th every day, every time, is a breakthrough in natural language processing. This research project funded by Google Research was the born of large language models that we know today. And as I will show you further down in the presentation, large language models are very, very important for anything that we do with AI nowadays. Because what did this Google research project do? They proposed a new, very simple network architecture for neural networks called the transformer. And this transformer network was used in models like GPT. And we'll come to that in a bit. So, just as a small recap for the first 5 slides, this is basically the journey AI has taken us to today. So, we can see we start in 1956, and then we go all the way to 1970s, 1980s, where we actually got the first researching neural networks in the university, at universities worldwide. There were still very small networks needing very large compute estates. And in the 70s and 80s, only universities had supercomputers. So, then at the early 2000s, we actually get maturity in neural networks. We get chatbots, we get video and photo recognition, we get self-driving cars even, sort of like Tesla's claim to be self-driving, but I really don't trust them. Especially not on Moldovan roads. But anyone drives a Tesla here, by the way? So I'll come speak to you after my session to see if they're safe to drive here. So now we have based on the OpenAI Foundation, we have tools like GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT that can actually make our lives easier as software developers. But the base of all those tools are large language models. And I want to go a bit deeper into this very important but subtopic of neural networking, because it's very important to understand how the likes of GPT are working. So GPT is based on a very large language model. So GPT-3 was trained on 175 million elements, and GPT-4 rumoredly is going to be trained on 100 billion elements. And GPT, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, so there you have the transformer architecture that Google came up with in 2017, applied to a very large pre-trained model, and you get the Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Next to that, the OpenAI Foundation basically made a blueprint of that GPT model, but trained it on 54 million GitHub repositories, and this is the model that is beneath GitHub Copilot. And that is why GitHub Copilot does so well at basically generating source code, because it was trained on source code and source code only, while the ChatGPT models are trained on a wide variety of elements on the internet, both code, both text, both cooking recipes, for all we know. So that is something to bear in mind for the comparison later on. So, these are some examples of what ChatGPT does when you ask them something about coding. So, if you want to know, so in Java, I want to print who called my method. I was looking at something new like extraction, stack trace, get stack trace, but then what? So basically, you asking GPT to finish your sentence, basically, and it does a pretty good job. They also implemented quite nice source code formatting here. But it gets more impressive. So in GPT-4, which is not yet publicly available, they even tried some lead code tests, and one of the more advanced ones. And basically, it won the first spot for execution time out of almost 1 million submissions. So basically, it was better than almost 1 million software developers combined. So I thought that was quite impressive. And this model will go live somewhere early next year. But we need to remember that large language models, they're not smart. They do not have something like human intelligence. They're associative on the data they have been trained with. So, as always, ChatGPT may and will produce inaccurate information. Because, like, not everything we read on the internet is true, right? Who believes everything they read on the internet? Yeah, so nobody. And ChatGPT that model is trained on information publicly sourced from the internet. And because it's a language model, it's an associative model, linguistical model, it's, for example, very bad at math. So if you ask ChatGPT, what is the product of 15,333 times 91,920, you will most likely, in this case, also get a wrong answer, because it can't really do math because it wasn't trained on doing math. So it tries to figure out linguistically what matches between the two, and then comes up with an answer that is complete rubbish. So, to recap, characteristics of a large language model is that they have no human intelligence or understanding of subject matter, which means that if you want to get something out of them, you have to provide them with the whole context. As we will see in some of the coding examples, if you want to generate a real-life greenfield application from ChatGPT, you need to tell it in very much detail all of the business context that you want it to have. If you do not, it will not magically understand the subject you're talking about. Also, it has limited knowledge. It has knowledge on the dataset it was trained, and it's biased. Every large language model is biased on the training dataset. Well, this gets better, of course, with the newer models that have bigger training sets. But for example, if you would take the GPT neural network and train it on your own source code or on your own company's database of documents, it will be biased towards the decision making in your company, towards your coding standards, your coding style. So keep that in mind. And the smaller the training set is, the more biased the outcoming model will be. Also, an LLM does not have a sense of responsibility. Like I said, there is no human-like intelligence that can basically has morals and values and stuff like that. No, it's just associative learning on a linguistics model. So don't think that this is like the Terminator in wording. No, this is just a language model. So it's very sensitive for input. So who of you has been to a conference where they had like a session on prompt engineering? Oh, a couple. So because, especially this year, I've seen a lot of conferences where they do a lot of sessions about prompt engineering. And that is because ChatGPT and other GPT-based language models are very sensitive for the input you put into them. So basically, the work shifts from writing the code to writing a prompt to generate good code. And if you write a bad prompt, you'll get bad results, basically. So the responsibility of you as a developer shifts from writing good code to writing good prompts, as we'll see shortly as well in some of the examples. And this is very important, so the copyright on the training data is still a gray area. I know that the OpenAI Foundation is facing, especially in the US, quite a couple of major lawsuits because they used private training data to train the models, and they and they also do not disclose on what data exactly they trained the models on. So it's really hard to figure out if your data was in any way used by GPT. And one thing that's today in an era of sustainability quite important to know is that computing such a request, such a prompt on GPT is quite resource intensive. So it consumes quite a lot of energy. So you want to try to keep the amount of iterations down as much as possible, because if you have to do 10, 20 iterations of a prompt before getting a great result, then you're wasting a lot of compute power and therefore also a lot of energy. And one thing actually that is not on this slide, I need to go one slide back. So one thing that's not on this slide is that for GPT, in this case, you have to know it's not only limited to knowledge, but also the knowledge is old. So the training data for GPT-3 and 3.5 is 2 years old, which will mean that if you basically 2 years means 10 JavaScript frameworks has passed, right? In that period since training data was commenced. So that basically means if you want to ask ChatGPT about that new JavaScript framework that came out 6 months ago and how to do something with it, it will not have a clue. So you need to keep that in mind, that you can't use latest and greatest technology with the prompts you're sending, because it simply does not have knowledge about such technology yet. But that, again, will be better in GPT-4. So now we can go on with basically why I'm having this conversation with you now and not last week, last month, or in half a year. Basically, what triggered me to create this session was the State of DevOps report, which was released by Google Cloud Foundation on October 5th, which is basically a month ago. And basically, I thought this was very interesting. So 60% of all respondents having a DevOps-like function, whether it's on the development side of things, on the operational side, on the infrastructure side, 60% of respondents said that they would be using some kind of AI tooling in any of these mundane tasks that they would have, like writing code blocks, analyzing data, analyzing and monitoring logs, writing tests, writing documentation. I think that's actually a very good one, because GPT is a linguistical model. It's actually better at writing documentation than at writing code. And because, more than half of respondents wants to do something with a large language model to basically ease their daily job. And then I thought, well, why not create a session to practically show how you can do that? So that is what we are going to do for the next half hour that I have left. We're going to talk about the experiment. So within my company, I created an experiment, generate greenfield code using prompts and prompts only. So we wanted to create a full web application, so both a front end and a back end, with just using prompts. So we wanted to refactor or do bug fixes only by using GitHub Copilot, completion, and signalation. And the end result should be a runtime stable and represent a runnable application. So then if you do something like that, then you get a conversation like this. So my prompt here is, how do I use Express.js to start a basic Hello World site? And in its essence, this is a bad prompt. But because this prompt just asks GPT something to do something technically without generating the context. And GPT then comes back with some code. And I would say, well, we're just going to try it now to see if this actually works, because I am quite interested to see if this actually works. So, actually, this is the complete conversation. So, yeah, it's visible. Is it big enough? No, I'll make it bigger. This is readable, right, for people in the back, right? Great. So I want to use a simple application. So actually, this is the original question. I want to create a simple web application without coding. What language should I use? So they're giving a couple options, like a couple really bad ones, like Wix or Squarespace, or like all of those like CMSs online that's like, especially Squarespace, like every YouTuber is like being paid to tell that's like a good thing to use. So then again, we want to do some local server, and then it gets like things like Python, Flask, Express.js. Oh, we actually think Express.js is a good option. So, and of course, Express.js runs on Node. So to start basic Hello World site using Express.js, follow the following steps. Okay. So we're just going to do what GPT says. npm init y. Okay. And now, of course, it's going to be, is the Wi-Fi still working? Yes, there it is. So actually, so basically what this does, this creates a package .json definition that will be used for my Node project. Then I need to install Express. So we'll do npm install Express. This is probably going to take a while because, like I said, the Wi-Fi wasn't that fast. Ah, there it is. There it is. So like I said, 30% of the world's public GitHub repositories is JavaScript. So I assume that we have about 30% JavaScript developers here as well, right? So who here codes in JavaScript on a daily basis? Well, yeah, I think it's about 30%. Okay, so now we basically have an Express.js boilerplate application. And then it's going to basically give us the source code for the hello world that we saw on the slide. So I'm just copy that and let's see. And then we're going to create a new file, app.js, paste it in. I'm just going to change this to hello MDC23. Okay. And then we need to run this, so it probably is going to tell us. Oh, I think it's Node, yeah, Node. So, Node app.js. Who here thinks this is going to work? Who thinks it's not going to work? Ooh, well, we're going to find out now. Ooh, so it started a web server on port 3000. So now the question is, if I go to localhost 3000, does it actually work? Yes, it does. We have, I'll make it a bit bigger. Yeah, thank you. Hello, MDC23. So actually, GPT, basically, it managed to do well on its first example. So then, let's see, where did I leave my clicker here? Let's go back to the second example, because we also want to make it a bit more interesting, right? So the second example, give an example in Node.js how to send a request to the ChatGPT API. So actually, I given a bit more context here. I want to actually create a REST interface towards the ChatGPT API. And therefore, it gives this code. So now let's go back. Let's see the full conversation again. So basically, it says, sure, basic example of how you might send a request to the OpenAI GPT-3 API using Node.js. Please know that you would need to replace with your actual OpenAPI key. Okay, so I need to install this package first. npm install Axios. So let's kill this first. npm install Axios. And in the meantime, let's already open the code. Oh, of course, I need to type correctly, David, not nmp, npm, install Axios. And then I am going to open a new file, and this is REST API.gpt.js. So probably this will not run because I do not have my OpenAPI key on hand, but at least we can try to see if this code is correct syntax-wise. So let's see. So it doesn't really complain. I also see no real syntax errors. That's good. Okay. And then we actually run this. Let's see if this will actually run. Probably not because I don't have my token. Let's see what happens if I run. REST. Yeah, it gives me an error. So, second example. It actually does send a request. So it just gives me a 401 unauthorized, which is expected because it didn't put in an API key. But again, also a very valid coding example. So, but what if we have like a complex example? So what if we want a more complex application, like an Angular application, for example? So then we'll go back here. So basically here I actually did the good thing of making an actual prompt that makes sense. So I gave it the context that it needed, because like I said, GPT doesn't know anything about context, so I need to provide all of the business context. So I did that. I say I am building an Angular app. It needs to display arguments, gave a statement. It has some requirements. I want an input page with a send button. I want to submit a request. I want the response to include a list of the supporting arguments, and the response needs to be nicely displayed. Also, I want to do some front end. I want to look clean. Well, I'm not sure if this was the best thing to say because I have no idea if GPT knows what that is. And I want an endpoint of the backend to look something like this. So I'm giving it a bit of a data structure to work with. So what is a good practice to do when you're doing these kinds of complex prompts is to give GPT a control flow. Because if you don't, it will just ramble on, and you might have already have what you need, and you're just using way too much compute. So what you say is, basically what you say, wait for me to write continue before writing the next file, and then did you understand? And then it says, yes, okay, great, I will write the Angular component first. I will assume that its component is named arguments component, and then we get the HTML. So let's copy that. So we're going to create a new file. Arguments.html. And we're going to paste that. And then we're going to go on, and then basically it says done. This is the first file. Then I say continue, which was the word we used in the control flow. Then we get the say CSS. So copy that as well. So that's argument component.scss. Let me see, new file, argument component.scss. So this is the SCSS file. Then once again, it says will print done at the bottom, which was the control flow statement for when it finishes a file. Then I say continue again, and now we're going to get a TypeScript. So this is going to be, oh, what did I need to call this? Argument component.ts. New file, component.ts. Okay, this is the component. Okay. Done, continue, then we have to create our Angular service. So this is the service that includes the HTTP client to actually call the backend. And then we need a module TS to import all the Angular modules. So, because I do not have Angular on this machine, I will not run this, but I will tell you that it doesn't work. So this was quite a complex application, but there is an error here, because the application doesn't understand this. It will underline it here already in my editor. It will say attribute ng model is not allowed here. So I'm asking GPT, why is that? Why have I an error that type event is not assignable to type string? Well, then it says event is an object being assigned to the statement property, which is expecting a string. The ng model directive is used for two-way data binding in Angular. It binds an input form elements to a property on the component. The syntax, okay. Seems like the error is caused by the fact that an event is being passed to the ng model instead of a string value. So it tries us to basically change this on the HTML, and then just calling the get arguments on the click event of the button. And then we just need to change the component slightly as well. Now we get another error. This is actually a different error, so we don't have a provider for the HTTP client. So probably the HTTP client here wasn't imported correctly, but what will it say? It will say, oh, I also need to be importing the HTTP client module. And I need to add it to the imports of the array of the ng model file. And then it will actually run the application, and it will just only give me a course policy now. And basically, even if, for example, you're a junior web programmer, you don't know about course policies, it will even try to explain you what course is and how you can fix that, or use Express to use the course package to fix that. Or even in Java, and now it all starts about Java all once, which I didn't expect. But basically, this is a more complex application that you can fix, but because this is so many prompts, really give this a good control flow. I think that is the main takeaway here. If you do not give ChatGPT a good control flow, it will just ramble on, and you will not know where to stop to actually check your code. Okay, so I've done this hackathon now a couple of times with a couple of 100 participants, and the biggest challenges that we found with generating code with ChatGPT is to give it enough business context about the problem. So in the first two smaller applications you saw, I wasn't giving any business context at all. And then in the last example, I gave it like maybe too much business context. So you need to find a balance there. Also, you still need to integrate your code into existing projects or a larger framework, because nobody wants to generate a Hello World application, really, because that's not something you can ship to a client. So you still need to integrate that code manually, and that doesn't always work. Third, so like I said, training data is behind on current development of languages and frameworks, so it will give you directions towards more well-known, larger frameworks. It will tell you to use React, Node, Angular, Vue, Java, .NET, Python. It will probably not tell you to use that next great JavaScript framework that just came out 2 weeks ago, because it doesn't know about that one. And you still have to worry about the correctness of results. So as we saw in the first 2 examples, they worked without any human intervention from me. So the third application, it was a bit more advanced, and there you see it needs to interact with different files, different services, and there you see it starts to basically mix and match wrongly. Because what it does, basically, it's like a junior developer fixing a problem with just Stack Overflow. They're copying snippet after snippet after snippet, and then you throw all the snippets together, and then it doesn't work. Because otherwise, anybody could be a developer if you could just copy and paste snippets from Stack Overflow, right? So you still have to integrate that stuff together. And the fifth problem for a lot of companies is confidentiality. So if you use the free version of ChatGPT, your prompts are also used for analysis, and the data you put in is also used as training data. So if you don't want to do that, you need to either now use OpenAI for Business, which will let you opt out of that, or use a paid version of GitHub Copilot, where you can also opt out of your own repositories being used for enhancements of the model. So, then the last 5 minutes, let's go, or maybe 3 minutes, into some other tools that can help you next to ChatGPT. So basically, it's like DevOps. These are all the AI tools that there currently are. But I think that for a developer, there are 3 that are really important. So we have GitHub Copilot, which is based on the OpenAI Codex model. We have Amazon Code Whisperer, and we have the JetBrains AI Assistant. So GitHub Copilot has a $100 per year subscription fee with an opt-out to train your own data. Amazon Code Whisperer is free, but it does not have an opt-out for training on your own data. So definitely don't use that if you do not want your inputs and your code to be used. It more or less has the same IDE plugins as GitHub Copilot. Of course, GitHub Copilot being developed by Microsoft, it has a bias towards the Microsoft IDEs like Visual Studio and VS Code. JetBrains AI Assistant is still in preview. It's a plugin for the JetBrains IDE, so if you already have a subscription for PHP Storm, IntelliJ, PyCharm, or Rider, you can use it for free. That one is based on OpenAI's GPT large language model, so not on the Codex model. So it's not as well trained on source code, but you can use it, for example, very well to write documentation for you or write test explanations, because being a linguistic model, it does very good at that. And it's still free, of course, if you have a paid subscription to one of those IDEs. So this is just a small demo of JetBrains AI Assistant. As you can see, the plugin is more like an integration of ChatGPT, because the interactions are really more GPT-like we saw on the ChatGPT website. But what it does well, it is much better at integrating snippets into an actual bigger application. So if you generate a snippet, you can actually insert that as a method, or you can ask it to create it as a new class, and it will automatically create a new file. And it will, of course, also pre-format to any of your JetBrains formatting settings that you have. So if you use a JetBrains IDE, so who here uses a JetBrains IDE? Great, that's good. Then definitely give this a try. It's on private preview right now in beta, but please, it will be available in the next couple months, GA, and then you can all just install it from the JetBrains plugin desk. Okay, so what have we seen today? So we have seen that AI can create working code at runtime, but that it cannot craft software. That is luckily still something that we need actual software engineers for. In the coming years, AI-assisted programming tools will become default in most IDEs. I think GitHub Copilot, the plugin that's now for JetBrains, will probably in the 2024 version of the IDEs be built in. Like I am using JetBrains Fleet on my laptop right now, which is a next generation lightweight IDE. It already has an AI assistant built into the core of the software. So it will basically, in the next couple of years, be like a regular tool, like you have a linter or syntax highlighting today. AI assistants will be the next normal tool you have in your IDE. So, what your manager thinks that AI is or AI does is most likely not something that you'll benefit from as a software engineer. So please keep that in mind. And like I said, garbage in is garbage out. If your prompt is garbage, then basically your code will be garbage as well. Okay, so one more thing. I'm really glad, Anton, that you had the Apple reference, because I always use this slide as well. So we have one more thing, like Steve Jobs used to say. So I think my professional opinion is that AI in software development will not replace human fingers on the keyboard. As I said, AI cannot craft software. It will not influence the use of low-code solutions developed by users. It will not lead to less jobs in the IT industry. However, by not utilizing AI, machine learning, or large language models to make your job as a developer more effective, it will lead you to being outperformed by those who do. So I would suggest to get on the running train right now. So please do try this at home. So with this QR code, you can get into this repository that we created for the hackathon, so you can actually do all of the examples that I did on the session today. And of course, OpenAI being now a majority owned by Microsoft, the Microsoft Learn platform also has some great free training for Azure OpenAI Service, for fundamental AI concepts, and to develop generative AI solutions. So please do use them. And then now, with 5 minutes left, it's time for questions. And because I know that asking questions may be scary, the first two people that ask a question will get a rubber duck. So,
yeah, just a second. We'll give a microphone. Yeah.
Will you please show with first example with Hello World?
this one?
No, Hello World one.
Oh, this one.
We code example. We code Hello World.
Oh,
First example, yes.
First example.
let's get back to the first example. Yes. Yes, this one.
Yeah, you see, in the second example, we have a constant in the second. In fact, we don't have it. What means this code was just searched on Google, I think. It has been written by two different people.
No, definitely that's the case, because like what ChatGPT does, it basically goes through all of its training data and tries to associate things. So what it will do, it will look for Express.js, Starter, and it will just have like a couple of lines of code from one example and then stitch a couple of examples from another example. As you can see, it also starts here all of a sudden to doing comments, and above it doesn't have any comments. So definitely this is something that has been stitched together indeed. And that's also something that can lead to mistakes. So it's not always that you're going to get runnable code if you just stitch two examples together. Yeah, so that's a really good catch. That's definitely the case. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have the microphone guy who will decide who will ask the question.
Thank you. Thank you for your speak. It was very nice. I wanted to ask, how do you think that we'll apply ChatGPT in security analysis, IDOR, automation in CD field?
So I think that for security, Basically, models like ChatGPT can be used like to search for CVE patterns, for example, because that are also code linguistical patterns, so that it would be very good at. It would be very good at searching through security databases, OWASP databases, for example. I think for CI/CD it will be a bit more tricky because I actually haven't tried this on YAML or something like that. But if you're going to like stitch together a YAML file from multiple sources with the YAML syntax, that most likely is going to be a nightmare anyway. So I think for CI/CD they still need like maybe to develop a new codex model that's specifically trained on YAML. I think with GitHub is now busy implementing Copilot into GitHub Actions, so then you can use it for developing your actions as well. But for security, I definitely see like reading through a lot of documentation, vulnerability catalogs and stuff like that. Yeah, it could be very useful for that.
Thank you.
Any more? I have 2 minutes left. Any more questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for a last question.
Yeah, so here comes the stupid question. When mentioning about the training data that was used to train the AI, you were mentioning like billions and billions of elements.
Yeah.
What is considered as an element? Like, I don't know, a book is an element or I don't
Okay,
know.
no, so basically ChatGPT works on elements and tokens. So I believe that one element in GPT is, I think, 7 or 8 ASCII characters. That's considered a single element, and that also uses one token to generate that single element from a prompt. So you could most likely compare it to being a single word or a single part of a sentence, maybe. So it's not it's a lot of content, but each element is quite small in its own sense. Great. Then.
Yeah, I think we don't have time for
Great.
questions for now, but David will be here.
Yes, I will be here today and tomorrow, so if you have any more questions, you can just come and find me on the conference floor. And for now, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.